Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating, honestly kind of glaring paradox at the heart of one of the world's largest agricultural powerhouses. The Indian farmer feeds the entire nation, yet they often capture only a tiny fraction of the profit their own labor generates. So how does this happen? And more importantly, how do we fix it? We're going to explore the systemic realities of rural development, figure out the disconnect between the farm gate and the market price, and look at what it really takes to build a thriving rural economy. So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by defining what rural development actually means, then look at the agricultural market system, rural credit, diversifying the rural economy, and finally, sustainable and organic farming. All right, let's kick things off with part one. What is rural development? Now, to really grasp the local hurdles, we've got to zoom out first to a massive global challenge. By the year 2050, we literally have to figure out how to feed 9.2 billion people. That means doubling global agricultural production, which is wild when you consider our arable land and fresh water supplies are actually shrinking. It's a huge, daunting task that requires some serious efficiency. And because of that immense pressure, rural development today isn't just about, planting seeds. True rural development is an integrated approach. It's a massive, interconnected web that has to support not just the farmer, but the marketers, the traders, the processors, basically the whole shebang. You have to fix the entire supply chain if you want to improve a single livelihood. Moving right along to Section 2, the agricultural market system. Let's introduce the main protagonist of our explainer, this small and marginal Indian farmer. Just look at this number, 86.2%. An overwhelming majority of farmers in India operate on less than 2 hectares of land. At that tiny scale, they essentially have zero bargaining power. It leaves them incredibly vulnerable to unpredictable weather. And of course, totally at the mercy of external market forces. And right here is the punchline to that paradox we talked about at the start. When you buy, say, a tomato or a bundle of grapes, the farmer might only see 32% of what you paid. A staggering 68% gets swallowed up by a long chain of middlemen, brokers, and retailers. The profit is totally hollowed out before it ever makes its way back to the village. Now, governments have definitely tried to fix this. They set up state-regulated markets, called APMCs, to stop the exploitation, and more recently launched eNAM. That's a digital portal meant to let farmers bid online nationwide. Great ideas, right? But the reality on the ground is pretty stubborn. Physical markets still end up with monopolies, and digital portals really struggle against spotty internet and gaps in digital literacy. Compounding all of this is a brutal infrastructure crisis. India is facing a severe 35% shortfall in cold storage. Think about it. If you're a small farmer growing perishables and you don't have a refrigerated truck, the clock is ticking loud and fast. You can't wait out the market. You are what economists call a price taker. You're forced to sell your crop immediately before it rots, usually for absolute pennies on the dollar. Which brings us to Section 3, credit in rural areas. So how exactly do you buy that refrigerated truck if you don't have access to a bank? Well, rural India faces a really stark divide here. On one side, formal institutional banks offer fair rates, but they demand mountains of paperwork and strict collateral. On the other side, you've got local moneylenders. Fast, easy cash, zero paperwork, but they charge exorbitant loan shark interest rates that can trap a farmer in endless debt. And that trap directly fuels what's known as the distress sale. Picture this, a farmer borrows from a local trader just to buy seeds. Harvest comes, the loan is due, and they desperately need cash. Since they can't wait around for favorable market conditions, they are forced to hand their crops straight over to that exact same trader at rock bottom prices. It's just this vicious closed loop of debt. That is exactly why group interventions are absolute lifesavers. Things like credit cooperatives and the Kisan credit card are total game changers because they bundle farmers together to lower financial risk. And because they're run locally, these cooperatives bypass the distant banks and completely cut out those predatory moneylenders, distributing credit so much more efficiently. Let's shift gears to Section 4, diversifying the rural economy. Okay, we've got a massive, untapped blind spot here. The data shows there are roughly 25 million non-farm, informal businesses in rural areas with credit needs that are just completely ignored by rural banks. If we really want to build resilience against, say, a bad harvest, funding the local repair shop or the weaver is the golden ticket. Because diversification takes the pressure off the soil. It means investing heavily in 3 main areas of rural non-farm employment:
local manufacturing, like agroprocessing, expanding rural trade and retail networks, and developing vital services like healthcare, education, and logistics. Doing this creates a multi-layered economy, so the village isn't relying solely on the rain.
And finally, Section 5, sustainable and organic farming. Now we have to look at the actual dirt itself. And this is fascinating. Research from the Infinite Journal really flips the script on organic farming. It frames it not just as some feel-good ecological choice, but as a highly viable, hard-nosed economic strategy for smallholders who don't have a lot of capital. Think about it. By ditching those incredibly expensive synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, farmers instantly slash their production costs. Relying on things like composting and crop rotation restores the soil, conserves local biodiversity, and, best of all, lets these farmers tap into premium price tags in rapidly growing consumer markets. Of course, the historic hurdle here has always been the expensive, bureaucratic nightmare of actually getting certified organic. But community-based innovations like the Participatory Guarantee System, or PGS, are changing the game. It's basically a low-cost, community-led stamp of approval that finally opens the door to premium markets for underfunded farmers. Throughout this explainer, we've seen just how deeply interconnected all these systems are, right? You can't fix the market without fixing credit, and you can't push organic farming without a robust local economy. So it leaves us with a really critical question. To truly empower the Indian farmer, should we first pour our resources into fixing the physical cold chain infrastructure, or do we start by completely reforming the rural credit system? I'll leave you to think about that. Thanks for joining me, and keep exploring.